Well, hey there. How are you? Welcome back to the Bobby Dizzle podcast. That hurt me to do. Anyway, I just want to say that this week's guest is a genius. He is the he's the he's the president of the Mobile Astronomical Society. His name is Taraz Wertelecki. He's from Mobile, Alabama, and builds speed ships for the Navy. So everybody give a big round of applause for Taraz, and prepare to get your mind blown with some astronomical facts and rabbit holes, as well as other little tidbits. Let's do this.
It's not a hard name to find because there are not many Ukrainians in Alabama.
No, you're the only one.
Well, not the only one. My family is here.
Well, I mean, by your name.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, I just typed your name in. Apparently, your Skype name is this weird factory. just the permutation of letters. I was like, well,
what name now?
Your Skype name was. Yeah, it wasn't the Aquila.
What was it?
It was like 7700A. It was like.
Oh, okay. That I didn't think anything. That must have been what I was looking for it last night, and I gave up.
Oh yeah, it doesn't matter.
I was trying to deal with something else at the same time, issue I was having, and looks like I'm gonna have to send away for replacement parts.
Oh, and your telescope stuff?
No, not my telescope. Something else. It's one of those things.
Ooh, all right. We got kind of an early start. If I hadn't had to restart.
Yeah.
Down there in Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah, in Mobile, Alabama, where you can have any color car you like this time of year as long as it's yellow.
Yep, as long as it's pollen.
And the pollen's whooping my butt. It has been for the past month.
Are you on the Zyrtec?
No.
The allergies?
I try not to take these things because I also have hypertension.
Mm.
They raise your blood pressure, and that's not a good thing. At least it's but if it gets really bad, I'll do it. But if it's not, I just try to soldier on.
All right. So what was it? You were the president of the. I told a couple people that I had someone on tonight, and it was the Mobile I can't even say the word.
Mobile Astronomical Society. It's the local club down here.
That's pretty. I kept trying to say Astrological Society. That's not it. It's not an astrologist.
No. Astrology. They'd be dealing with things like what's your horoscope tonight?
Yeah, there's probably some of those down on the bayou, though. There's probably a Mobile Astrological Society.
There might be, but I haven't heard of one.
Mm-hmm. How did you get into to be so in depth into astronomy like you are?
A combination of things, actually. Actually, I think my dad left his binoculars out where I can find them when I was 8 years old. That was one. That, of course. And let's see, this was back in 1974, 75. Star Wars hadn't come around yet, but Star Trek was on TV. And you also had TV series like Space 1999. You may be old enough to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
With the funny look. Well, the special effects were painfully bad. I mean, but hey, this was television, low-budget TV back in 1975. And
they really misjudged what 99 was going to be back then.
Yeah, they did. But anyway, it was that, and I watched the Apollo moon landings. I mean, I think I watched them all, at least when they televised it, but I know for sure I watched the Apollo 11 landing live. I was 3 years old, but I remember it. I mean, my parents and I were up late at night watching them descend the ladder and walk on the moon for 2 hours, 2.5 hours before they had to return to the lunar module. And so it was a combination of things. Plus, my dad is a retired physician. My mother worked in medical labs. She did scientific work. I mean, if you're operating electron microscopes and preparing specimens, that's pretty scientific work. And this was in the day when computers were for the guys with white coats, the reel-to-reel magnetic tape, all that. You may movies of the period and later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they were simple then. Sometimes they were just people, weren't they?
Huh?
They were just people. Computers were just people.
Well, actually, that was literally the case before. Stacks of paper, and boxes of pencils.
Mm-hmm.
That was. I mean, even this was back in the day when the first calculators came out. My dad was one of the first to have one of those Texas Instrument calculators. And they sold for $400 in the late 70s. That was a lot of money, and it was almost like working a personal computer. The ones that came out in the 80s when you had to do DOS, you had to enter commands with a thing. And of course, it had the red LED display and all that. So, I mean, that's kind of how it. And of course, they gave me a telescope. I think I had a spotting scope or something when I was 9 or 10, and then when I was 13, my mom gave me a 6-inch equatorial reflecting telescope, which turned out to be more than I could handle at the time, because I was on the small side. Not anymore, obviously, but
yeah, you grew up a little.
But at first I had a lot of trouble carrying that in and out of the house, as you can well imagine, and had no one to help me with things like polar alignment. So I just looked at what I could find, what I could see, which was mainly the moon and the planets with it. But I still have the primary mirror for it. I mean, the mounting and the rest of it is gone, but I still got the primary mirror in another telescope right now sitting in my living room.
You ever still take it out and use it? The original?
I still use it on occasion. I mainly look at the moon and planets with it at home or I take it to public stargazers because it's pretty well suited for that, and it does good when you're not in a area lit up like an airport.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, where I live, I have a street light right in front of my house, but that's not nearly as much of a problem for me as the highly directional lights my neighbor has at his house. So I just kind of gave up on using it here. I just take it somewhere else now to use it if I really want to do anything in depth with it.
You know, I was amazed at how easy, like a pair of, like you said, your dad's binoculars were, about how well they saw the moon. When I was younger, I was like, dang, you can really see some detail.
Oh yeah, better than Galileo.
So I guess a telescope would be really, really awesome. Even the low grade ones.
Well, yes and no. Most of the telescopes that are sold, the optics are okay, if not good. But usually the biggest problem with them is the mountings are not really quite up to the job, not steady, or they just are just so difficult to use. And that's what has probably turned legions of people off to astronomy. That and the horrible aiming devices they have, whether it's a finder scope or an electronic dot sight or a reflex sight or something, you have to be able to actually accurately, you have to be able to see a doggone thing through it.
It's almost like the ones that I've seen are like glorified toilet paper tubes. Just a hole with a piece of plastic in them.
Some of them are a little better than that. So, I mean, with that in mind, I mean, you can get a pretty nice view of the moon with a 3-inch telescope. If you have good optics and good seeing. A 6-inch is a lot better. A 10-inch shows yet more, but it starts getting it gets uncomfortably bright. When it's a gibbous or full moon, it's almost too much. you're going to want to use a moon filter.
Oh, really? So it gets too bright to even look at, kind of like looking at the sun.
Yeah. You can actually put a reverse image of the moon in the field of vision. I mean, forget about your night vision if you do that.
So it literally burns into your retina like weldings.
Much. And a larger telescope, it's not quite as bad as looking at a welding arc without a face shield, but it's unpleasant. I mean, at least if you're talking about the whole moon, when it's at or near full, when you're seeing a small part of it, it's a little bit more tolerable. When the phase is much closer to new, it's not so bad. But full moon is when you have a really bright moon, and with the usually at best mediocre scene around here, you really don't want to look at the moon through a large telescope anyway, because you just see more turbulence than anything else. And you get a lot of radiation in your eyes. The bright areas bleed over in the dark areas. It's like the same thing that happens with a video camera when you overexpose.
Mm-hmm.
It blows out highlights, and it just makes it difficult to see a lot of fine details. At least unless you can somehow reduce the brightness level a little bit. And that's what these moon filters are good for, or you could use a nebula filter in a pinch if that's all you have.
Nebula filter. Oh.
Yeah, that's another accessory that unfortunately, if you're going to do much astronomy, you're going to be buying at least one of them. And even that is not going to because of LED lighting, they're going to soon be virtually useless too. At least in a bright area. Now they still help a lot in the dark area, believe it or not. There's natural light pollution out there, but in a city, it's going to get to where if you live in a built-up area, if you really want to see fainter objects, you're going to have to invoke the other filter. But this one you don't order through the mail. This one you go to the gas station. It's called a full tank of gas.
Drive out somewhere.
Yeah, you'll have to invoke the gas tank filter.
I understand that. I remember the first time my wife came home and I lived way out in the sticks, and she lived here kind of in Huntsville, and she goes, "Man, it's dark out here. You can see all these stars. Makes a difference."
Yeah. Well, it's dark. It's much darker up there than in Mobile. I've been to Huntsville before. And there are other areas in Alabama. The skies are pretty dark. Not necessarily a good idea to be out there, though. You have to be careful. In many areas of the state, there's not much in the way of law. Lots of problems.
Yeah, you got to know whose land you're on for sure.
Yeah, and you want to be there at that person's permission. You can get because of the illegals, the meth heads, and other people. People are getting a lot, and also idiots who run around these four-wheelers and do other things. People are getting a lot less tolerant. And I can't say I blame them.
No.
I mean, of this. So it's just a good idea just to work something out beforehand. And I hate to say it, but there's some areas that I flat out would not try observing from. It's just too dangerous. I've had some experiences. I mean, I probably don't really want to go into here, but let's say I've had some experiences.
Feel free. You can go as deep as you want to.
Well, let's just say one individual got a good look at a 1911 I was armed with.
Ooh.
They tried to run me over in the field. Yeah, we have people like that down here in Mobile. That wasn't the only one. I mean, I don't want to bore you with the details, but
pulling a gun in a field isn't a boring detail. I'll tell you that. I'm back here listening. Like, what?
Well, I didn't. The guy came in the field, pointed his vehicle at me, and gunned the engine like he was about to barrel straight towards me. And that's assault with a deadly weapon.
Yeah, a cop would shoot you if you tried that.
Yeah, cop. And it was only when he did that is when I pulled the gun.
So you were just in a field trying to do some astronomy.
Yeah, a field that's it was accessible to anyone at any time. So I wasn't trespassing. So what reason he had to do what he did, I'll never know. I didn't want to find out.
Probably has a lot to do with that meth you were mentioning earlier.
Well, that or he was just someone looking for trouble, and he found it. And luckily, I didn't have to shoot him, or I didn't have to use the gun. It was enough that I displayed the gun, and that alone can get you jail time. And that can get you years behind bars in some jurisdictions.
Yeah, but he coming after you with a car, that's justified.
Right.
I think he would have got out of that one.
But needless to say, when he saw this 5-inch barrel stainless steel 1911 in my hand, he decided to, and the fact that I was in a low ready position, he decided to leave. So it is not without risk going out in the hinterlands here. I mean, I'm talking about southwestern Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
So generally speaking, what a lot of people do here is the local club, we use an airstrip with the permission of the owners. They allow us to go out there, and we just agree to leave the place as we found it. And that's another thing a lot of people do. A lot of people just make a mess wherever they go. And so we leave no trace that we're there. No garbage, no run over anything. It's sad commentary in our society that people can't have common courtesy. I mean, in the past, it was a lot easier to do things like this, but it's not so anymore. Now, there is a national forest you can go to. It is federal land. You can go out there, and it is one of the darkest areas in Alabama you'll ever find. But it's 100 miles is a bit much for me.
Which one is that? Down by you?
Conecuh National Forest in southern Alabama. That's probably the darkest area you can get.
I was thinking Bankhead, but that's closer to me.
Other than that, there is a Coffeyville area where the dam is. Those areas they're not black zone sites, but they're dark gray. So if you don't see it there, you probably aren't going to see it in a black zone either. What I mean by black zone, gray zone, a black zone is no light pollution at all.
That'd be like out in the desert or the ocean. Something like that?
Yeah, like if you were hundreds of miles out at sea away from the oil platforms and the shipping lanes, like I'm a shipbuilder by trade. I'm a marine electrician. And some of the sailors have told me about what it's like when you're out there like that. It's beautiful, but could also be extremely dangerous because the sky can fuse with the water, and you can get really disoriented really fast. If there's something out there in the dark, sometimes they go out darkened ship for, it's because after all, they're on combat missions or something to combat. You're not going to be out there with all your nav lights and people on the deck with lit cigarettes and all that. That could be seen 50 miles.
You can see that as far as Earth goes there, a lit cigarette.
Yeah, well, just one guy on the deck with a lit cigarette is all it takes to ghost yourself. So when they sail out like that and the skies are clear and the water is calm, I mean, he actually described it, Milky Way, stars down the horizon, and then they're reflecting off the water. That would be black zone skies. I've been to the Conecuh is like a dark gray, and it's not quite that dark, but you could see not only see the zodiacal light this time of year right now, but you could see the Genghis sky and the glow of interplanetary dust following the zodiac. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me when I first saw this.
The interplanetary dust? Now, what is that?
Well, the solar systems, there's still a grinding mill.
Mm-hmm.
The asteroids still bump into each other out there and spray off a lot of rocks and dust, and then these pieces will re-impact each other later, and it ends up turning to dust. And this follows the plane of the orbit of the planets, and the sunlight reflects off of that. And you can sometimes, if the sky is clear and dark enough, in other words, you don't have a bright moon around, and if you're around spring and fall, that's when the zodiac makes a steep angle with respect to the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
It's high up in the sky, and it looks like a second but fainter Milky Way. And the Genghis sky is the counterglow. That's the spot that's exactly opposite of the sun. So you have dust being lit head on from in front. And it's really weird. But once you know what to look for, it's surprisingly easy to see.
But you can see that with your telescope, or do you say naked eye?
Naked eye.
Oh shit!
You don't need a telescope.
That's crazy.
I mean, this is visually on an eye. Or if you have a low light video camera, you could record this, or you can photograph this easily. I mean, it's bright enough to get on film, and that's what Kaneka is. I mean, we went out there and. Well, that was where I mentioned saw a galaxy 3 billion light years away.
Yeah, the one that was 100 billion times the mass of the sun.
Well, no, that's IC 1101,
Okay.
the one with the black hole that is at least 40 billion and might be at least 100 billion solar masses,
Jesus.
Which is, that is just.
Dude, that hurts my brain.
That is more than an average spiral galaxy.
That's just one black hole is that big.
One black hole.
Glad it's staying over there.
That is an entire substantial galaxy in one object. And this galaxy, I had never seen it yet. It's on my to-do list.
And what was the name again? The other one, the one you just mentioned.
It's called IC 1101.
Okay.
But these other galaxies, I don't know what their names were. I don't even know they had names. But when I was at Kaneka with someone else, he had a 25-inch Dob. I had a 10-inch. And in that dark area, I saw the horse head clearly, which is, you see that in photographs, but believe me, that is very tough to see visually. And really, a big telescope really helps with that. But you don't need a large telescope to see it. You could say you've seen it. You can actually see it with an 8-inch or a 10-inch, but it's not going to look anything like pictures. But we were looking at that, but we were also looking at these galaxies that I don't even have any idea how we found out about them or what they were. But we were looking at them through his 25-inch telescope at over 500 power, and they were hardly bigger than stars, yet it was obvious which one were stars and which were galaxies, because they looked like oblong peanuts. They were probably like IC 1101, but just a heck of a lot further away yet. 3 billion light years away.
That's just hard to think of in my mind, my little peanut mind.
Probably what they call a CD galaxy, which stands for center diffuse. Mm-hmm. These are only found in one place, in the middle of a big galaxy cluster, and typically a galaxy cluster that's full of elliptical and lenticular galaxies. In other words, not many spirals like the Milky Way, and they're massive objects, and they got that way by swallowing other galaxies and becoming the fat cat in the center. And of course, since they have a black hole, the black hole also fattens up. Time galaxies merge, the black holes in them feed, and they often merge too. So as they say, as the black hole goes, so does the galaxy.
Yep. Like the anchor.
Right, and they think, and what it looks like is, it looks like these big black holes came first, and they helped the galaxies form. Ironically, their very messy eating habits is what prevents everything from simply going right into them. Because when they feed, the material they're ingesting starts blasting off so much heat and radiation that it actually can stop or slow down the approach of material further away. And instead of going into the black hole, it can go into orbit around it. So the black hole can actually capture and collect stuff and hold it together so it can then form stars, because in the center of our galaxy where the supermassive black hole is, mm-hmm. there is a burst of star formation going on right now. It's forming very massive, short-lived blue giant stars like crazy.
Can you see that from the telescope? See the new blue giants?
Unfortunately, we can't because there's just too much interstellar gas and dust between us and them, at least in visible light. But they are seeing this in infrared. That's how they're seeing the black hole too. But a longer wavelengths than you would be able to do. You can do infrared imaging. I've been doing that already because the terrible scene we have down here. It's you have less trouble with poor seeing when you're imaging the moon in infrared rather than visible light. But for these astronomers that have been studying the center of the galaxy, the infrared goes right through the interstellar dust and gas, and then you can see what's happening. And we're watching the stars whipping around the central black hole, and that's how they were able to first determine where it is and how much mass it has.
So they have infrared images of the one in the Milky Way, the central black hole.
Where it's sitting right now, where it is, they can't see it because it's, for the most part, it's quiet, but it's not always that way. 5 million years ago, or something like that, there was a very big outburst in the center of our galaxy, and that actually has the effect of stopping star formation, at least temporarily. So basically, the black hole controls the galaxy. It can stimulate star formation. It can shut it off.
That's just crazy, because when you think of black holes, you think of just everything near it's dead. I didn't think of it causing like a clog and making everything actually happen.
Well, that depends on some qualifiers. Okay, a supermassive black hole, the more massive a black hole is, first of all, the less density needed for a given amount of mass to become a black hole. Secondly, the tidal forces outside of it rapidly lessen the increasing mass. And before long, the point where the tidal forces would destroy anything that approaches will actually be inside the event horizon, not outside of it. So a stellar mass black hole, you can't get anywhere near one. You would be killed long before you get anywhere near it. The tidal force would tear your spacecraft apart, then tear you apart. But a supermassive black hole, you can come right up to the event horizon. We wouldn't want to do that, though, if it's speeding.
No. What was the other kind of black hole you said? Stellar force?
The stellar size black hole.
Stellar size, okay.
These are born from either merging neutron stars, which are too massive to remain stable as a neutron star, goes right to a black hole, or you have a gamma ray burst where a massive star, the core collapses, and because it's too massive to remain as a stable neutron star, it will collapse right to a black hole, and then it will promptly start swallowing the rest of the star from the inside out. And when that starts happening, it blasts out a gamma ray burst. It may pull the whole star completely into itself, or the accretion disk the outburst of energy from that would blow the rest of the star apart. Either way, you have a black hole left. That's how you get a stellar-sized black hole. And but the supermassive black holes, they formed probably even before the first stars did. What they think those are is they were slightly some intergalactic gases that got clumps that got dense enough to go right into a black hole state. And that's the seeds of the first galaxies.
He put me on hold.
Hello?
There you go. Yeah, it went on hold for a second. I figured you clicked another app.
Hang on a second. I don't know what's going on here.
That's all right. Somebody trying to call you?
I think that was my voicemail.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. It didn't hang up, but you was on hold. I was like, what happened? That's all right. At least it's not dropping every 15 seconds like it has been for the last few.
Yeah. So, like I said, you can't see this through a telescope, but you could see what it does to something else you could see,
Yeah.
and that's why they were all excited about this interstellar cloud heading straight for the central black hole in our galaxy and see what it would do. And I don't know what came of that yet, because I know there was some question whether or not it really was simply just a cloud of gas, or was it a star with a cloud of gas around it?
Is that maybe what they're going to show next week on the 10th from the Event Horizon telescope?
I'm not sure. I think what they were trying to do there was actually take a picture of the black hole silhouetted by whatever matter is around it.
Kind of like what's it called, Goliath from Interstellar? How they had that look?
Yeah. Something like that.
Freaking crazy. That and gamma ray bursts that can wipe out the whole solar system, but that's beside the point.
Well, gamma ray bursts, they're not, in the early history of the universe, they were going off all the time. And it takes, well, here's what they do know. Stars in the early universe had much less heavier elements in them. And that affects how these stars evolve. So they get a lot bigger because hydrogen and helium simply don't get pushed around by radiation the way heavier atoms do, like iron or oxygen. They have so many more possible ways for electromagnetic radiation to interact with them, especially when they're partially ionized. In other words, they still have some electrons, but they're not a neutral atom. But they think the first stars, some of them may have been 10,000 times as massive as the sun.
There's some that big now, aren't there?
No.
I know they had that.
No stars that big. The biggest stars that they have seen now probably are somewhere in the area of 200 solar masses, and that's it's very uncertain. I mean, the error bars are large, so they can only say a general ballpark. But whatever they are, these stars are millions of times more luminous than the sun, and they call them luminous blue variables, and they're very rare. There might only be a few dozen of them in the whole Milky Way, but they're bright enough to be seen from very large distances.
Are any of the popular ones one of those? Sorry.
Big right?
Are any of the popular stars one of those big blue ones?
What, you mean the well-known name stars?
Yeah, the constellations.
There is one in the Milky Way that is visible to the unaided eye, or at least the area where it is, and that's Eta Carinae. The star itself is hidden now in a nebula of its own making. But in 1843, it burped out 10 solar masses of material.
Really?
And this star is close to death, and when it goes, it will be a gamma ray burst. But they know that it won't be pointed at us because it has a companion, and because of that, they can work out which way the poles are pointed. They're pointed safely away from us. But when this thing goes off, it won't be visible from here, but in the southern hemisphere, it will be bright possibly as bright as a full moon.
Wow.
All they know for certain is that the primary star is still over 100 solar masses, and it has a companion that's a mighty star in its own right. It's over 30. They're something like a 5.5-year orbit. And these stars are so close that their stellar winds are actually ramming into one another enough to create very strong X-rays. Because the plasma coming off the larger star is flying off into space that makes the solar wind look like it's like trying to compare a DC-3 to an SR-71. I mean, that's how much faster it's going. It's going 3,000 miles a second. I mean, it's flying. And the other star is putting out a wind of its own. So this is one of them. It's what they call a luminous blue variable. And these are those stars that tend to, they either will go off as a gamma ray burst, or there's an even more extreme kind of supernova that seems to be the upper limit. And this is where you heard of E equals MC squared, right?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Okay, well, normally in a star, what happens is a little matter gets turned to energy, and that's what supports the star against its own gravity. But if you put enough energy into a photon, it will spontaneously flip to matter. Exactly what happened in the Big Bang. And if this happens to one of these stars, that has the effect of, it's like knocking the foundation out from under a building. And in other words, when that happens, it's what they call pair instability. The whole star explodes. One big nuclear reaction, and there is no black hole. There's nothing left but a big expanding cloud of debris, full of heavy elements, of course.
Would that cause any kind of damage to a nearby planet like a gamma ray burst would? Or would it just happen in
gamma ray bursts are like shaped charge warheads. The blast is directional, was really bidirectional, along with stars' poles. Any planet, if a planet is 100 light years away and it's in one of those jets, it probably would be melted, maybe even vaporized. Because it doesn't emit all that energy all directions. It emits the vast majority of it in two narrow beams, like a laser. That's why they're so dangerous. 1,000 light years away, it would probably sterilize the planet. 8 or 10,000 light years away, the jury is still out. I think the thinking is that it would do harm, quite a lot of harm, but it wouldn't destroy the planet, but it wouldn't do us any favors. Further away, say like a couple of million light years away, well, wouldn't be any harm, but it would make gamma ray satellites go crazy. I mean, astronomers could hardly be ignorant of one going off in a nearby galaxy pointing at us. They would know, and every astronomer would be dropping what they're doing and looking at it. So it depends on the distance, but also it might also depend on the star itself. I don't know if gamma ray bursts all have the same amount of energy. I don't think they're like Type 1a supernova, which all go off of roughly the same force. So it's kind of hard to say. But they're not common now.
That's good. I mean, they tried to scare me with a documentary back about 20 years ago when I was terrified that Alpha Centauri was going to go up at any minute.
Well, here's the thing. All supernova attempt to go off as a gamma ray burst, but here's why most of them don't. Okay, well, the stars that go off as a gamma ray burst, they're young, they're very massive, they're spinning very, very fast, and they've also ejected their outer hydrogen envelopes to space already. So what you have is a dense ball of heavier elements. So when the jets form around the black hole, they have no problem punching their way out of the star and blasting off into space. But the later stars, more often than not, most of that outer hydrogen envelope is still in place. So they don't escape into space like that. What they do is they help rip the star apart. But they have seen with that supernova 1987A, the one in the Large Magellanic Cloud, you probably remember that. They saw a telltale signature of the jets, or the failed jets.
How long ago was that?
Well, it actually happened 170,000 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, how long till it got there?
Burst forth in 1987. Unfortunately, It was for the southern hemisphere, so us northerners missed out.
I was
Though
4.
we did get some good ones in nearby galaxies. There was a great one in M81, and then you could see a supernova of binoculars.
Really?
Yeah,
That'd been cool.
yeah, and there's several nearby galaxies. What I mean by nearby, within 20
Hmm.
25 million light years, that they go off all the time. Every 10, 15 years, another one goes off on average. In other words, these galaxies have a lot of star formation going on, therefore they have a lot of supernova. So if you keep watching them, the chances are good you're going to see. You may not be the one who discovers it, but you're going to see it.
Have you seen a supernova go off? I mean, just like a big explosion?
Not the moment it happens, and no one really has until recently. I mean, I think there was one time where astronomers actually did catch a star at the very moment it did blow apart.
I think I did see an article on that one.
Yeah, I believe it was a white dwarf because most supernovae in the universe are white dwarfs that they steal so much matter from another star, or you have a pair of them that they think white dwarfs might do the same thing the neutron stars do. You know, when they form in pairs, close pairs, and they could spiral in and merge with one another. I don't think there's been any examples of that found. But that would, but this type of object is the most common kind to go supernova, because most stars end up as white dwarfs, and a lot of them are in binary systems. A lot of them are in a position to later act like a zombie corpse and suck the life out of a companion star, and some of them get too heavy to remain stable as a white dwarf any longer, and they just collapse. And before they could become a neutron star, nuclear fusion starts, and because these stars are collapsed matter, it's like a boiler with no safety valve. In other words, the reaction is it's like a nuclear warhead. It just in less than a second, the star can no longer hold itself together, and it just flies apart. And that's why we have all the iron and titanium and vanadium and other elements like that. They don't get into space from the big star. Those end up going into the neutron star, the black hole.
So that's how all that stuff came about, from those kind of stars.
Right.
Yeah.
White dwarfs are. So if you see a supernova, odds are it's a white dwarf. But about 9 or 10% of them are not white dwarfs. They could be blue giants, red giants, and a lot of the blue stars actually used to be red supergiants, but they lost their outer envelopes and they contracted back into a blue giant. They're still extremely bright, but they're much smaller than they were as a red supergiant. And there's some variations in that are some are theoretical but are possible. In fact, you might want to look this up just for your own amusement, but check out Thorne-Zitkow object. They may have found one.
Thorne-Zitkow? How do you spell that?
ZHKOW, something like, or ZHTKOW. She's a Polish astronomer.
Oh.
And
there we go.
You may know that they found a lot. There's a lot of supernova remnants out there in the galaxy. There are a lot of neutron stars, in the galaxy also, but you don't see them typically together. And the reason for that is the supernova that makes the neutron star, and that's what usually happens with a core collapse supernova, is you end up with a neutron star, is that it's asymmetrical enough to fling the neutron star away in a random direction at a very high speed. Eventually, most of them will leave the galaxy. They're moving too fast for the galaxy's gravity to hold them back. But sometimes they think, in some cases, one gets kicked into a massive companion star and it ends up in the center. Like the aliens in Stargate SG-1. And it's over. And the reason why they theorize this is there are some red supergiants that have unusually high levels of certain elements that are not made easily in stars. Lithium, for example, is very difficult to make in a star, and it doesn't stars tend to burn it more than make it. So why is there's such high levels of this and other elements like rubidium? Again, hard to make in a star. But a neutron star makes these elements quite easily because it has the one thing that's needed, and that's lots and lots of extra neutrons laying around. You may be familiar with that crash they detected in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was two neutron
crash?
stars. Yep. Two neutron stars merging into a black hole, but a substantial portion of both escaped into space as heavy metal. Lots of heavy metal.
Hypermassive magnetar. What?
Well, magnetar. A magnetar is basically a magnetically hyperactive neutron star, and that's another sort of a gamma ray burst. That's the absolute last thing you'd want passing close to you or for you to get near.
I imagine it seems pretty rough from what I'm Googling as you go here.
Well, here's what makes these stars dangerous. No one knew they existed, but a gamma ray satellite picked up a extremely strong burst of radiation from the other side of the galaxy, 70,000 light years away. It actually caused the satellite to go blind temporarily. When they looked at the data, they realized, the ISS was on the other side of the Earth when this burst happened. They calculated that had they been on the side facing this magnetar when it decided to burp, they would have got more radiation than you would have got from a dental X-ray. Now, that's not a dangerous dose, but think about it. 70,000 light years away, and you still get enough radiation exposure to take a dental X-ray? That's a significant dose of radiation.
You think it would have hurt the space station if that had hit it?
No, but the thing is, if you're out in space, these stars burp like that. They have the magnetic field in these stars is so strong that it actually cracks the crust of the star. It causes like a solar flare, only it's far more powerful. And that blasts gamma rays all the time in these bursts. And there's who knows how many of them. And they only stay this way for a short period of time. A magnetic field like that cannot maintain its strength for all that long. In a few tens of thousands of years, it will lose enough of its punch to where it will probably just become a regular pulsar. Still a powerful and dangerous object, but not capable. It would not be having these outbursts all the time, but those pulses of radiation just keep on going through space. So if you're out there, you're getting exposed to this. And because it's gamma rays, not charged particles, magnetic fields have no effect on it.
Now, is it that kind of radiation that, the people who, deny the moon landing. They say that no way they could have withstood the radiation going from here to the moon. Was it that kind that was
I
they were
haven't heard
mentioning?
about that. I heard most of the lunar naysayers mainly pertain to like why is the sky black, and some other things like why isn't there a crater under the engine, which is malarkey because the if you've ever been to the lunar module, you'll see that the engine is quite large, and the exhaust spreads out over a large area. And why the sky is black in the photos? Well, I mean, I used to be a photographer. I can explain that perfectly easily right here. When you take pictures of the moon in daytime, you use the old sunny f/16 rule. It's just like being on the beach on Earth. So if you have such speed film, you set your lens to f/16, use the shutter speed closest to the ISO rating of your film, take your picture, and you can't miss. It'll be properly exposed. But if you take a photo like that, and even if there's stars in the sky, there will not be enough time for them to record. And if they tried to expose their film long enough to show the star, then they would have bleached out the ground themselves, and there's everything else. So, I mean, a lot of those arguments they're making are bogus. But the biggest thing, to me, the biggest factor that shows these people are nuts is Buzz Aldrin's reaction to one of them, confronting him with that. You know what he did?
He punched him in the face.
Punched his lights out.
Yeah, that was hilarious. I love that video.
If I ever met Buzz Aldrin, I'd want to shake his hand because I can understand why he would react that way. Because, well, as Apollo 13 reminded us, they took a huge risk doing what they did, but they thought it was worth it. These people are besmirching them, their character, everything they've done. I mean, wouldn't you have been angered by that? I would have been.
Oh, I'm angered by it, and I'm 30 years removed from it. It angered me just the thought of somebody thinking it didn't happen. So yeah, I can imagine if you actually did go.
Yeah,
that argument fires me up.
Unfortunately, you know that Armstrong's gone.
Yeah, a few years ago.
Yeah. The other thing is, though, the astronauts that went to the moon, though, they have learned something, though. They all have a much higher rate of cancer than they should have relative to the rest of the population. So they did pay a price for going to the moon. I mean, I think they all would say that it was well worth the risks they took and even whatever health consequences they may have had. But, it's interesting that one of them, Swigert, died not long after he returned from Earth of cancer.
I didn't know about that one.
That was true. If you watch the Apollo 13 movie, that really happened. Yeah. I mean, he after he left NASA, he went into politics, and he actually won an election. He won the election, but he succumbed to cancer shortly after that.
Yeah, that's in the post credits. Where are they now? Paragraphs, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's been a couple of years since I've seen Apollo 13.
Well, you see, it's not just those gamma rays in deep space, but the solar wind and everything else. I don't think they knew they were risking radiation exposure out there. They knew that, but I don't think they really realized just how much danger they were in until the last two missions. I think that's one reason why they haven't gone back, is that there was a solar flare that blasted through the Earth-Moon system between this Apollo 16 and 17 mission. It was very, very fortunate for us that neither of them were out there when this flare arrived, because it would have killed them.
The guys on the moon?
Yeah.
Or just in the spaceship in general?
That spacecraft would offer no shielding whatsoever. And aluminum is one of the worst things you could be behind when you have high energy radiation like that, whether it's charged particles or neutrons or gamma rays, aluminum atoms tend to shatter into fragments, and that then hits your body and does more damage.
So it would have been like a bomb going off if that would have happened.
It's more like what happens when armor-piercing shells penetrate armor, like on a ship. It's not just the projectile that comes in; it's the piece of armor it knocks loose, and the thousands of metal splinters that come in with it.
It's like a claymore coming at you.
Yes, and that's what happens with these high-energy cosmic rays and other things. When they impact a spacecraft and when they impact you, they create this same effect. And so I think they all did pay. They paid a personal price, for their achievement. So that's why I think that's one reason why we haven't gone back to the moon. Is first of all, if you're going to risk people's lives, you're not going to going there to pick up a few more rocks and then plant a flag and fly away. You're going to have to do better than that.
I always wonder why they didn't improve it and colonize it. I was like, surely to goodness, like why did that get scrapped?
The Apollo was an exercise in national prestige.
Yeah, that was peacocking, wasn't it?
Yes, but later in the program, towards the end, I mean, there was always thought to getting some scientific return out of it, and that's what the last three missions were. First of all, the reason why the last three missions ever happened was they had the Lunar Rover, because you can't walk very far. There's no way you can do it. Not with the spacesuit technology they had then. So because they had the Lunar Rover and because they can travel miles, and they did, they went way out of sight of their lander, and they went to places that were of great interest, and the samples they brought back, vindicated the decision to go ahead these last three flights. And those are the ones that have really paid off in terms of what they learned about the moon. If they hadn't had the rovers, Apollo 13 might have been the last flight.
I found out that 13 is what caused them to kind of abandon it after even after the last 3 or 4. I didn't realize Nixon canceled it.
Well, I mean, they did. If they hadn't had the LEM, there would have been no saving them.
Nope, that was it.
And I don't think Nixon or anyone else in the U.S. government would have considered the very idea of 3 people dying in space live on television.
It wouldn't have been optimal, that's for sure.
That was not the outcome they were shooting for.
You just think they would have come back with that shuttle. As quick as they came up with the shuttle after the Apollo, 10 years, they could come up with something that could get there a little bit better and safer, instead of just that semi truck floating around for PR. Yeah,
well, I don't think that's. I know there's work being done. I mean, they were working on the X-33 Venture Star. What got that and everything? The engine technology was being developed for it even during the Apollo program. Maybe you've heard of the Aerospike.
Aerospike?
Well, this is a rocket engine that has been tested many times. Has not. What it basically is a bell-shaped rocket engine turned inside out.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at it now. It's crazy looking.
Crazy looking it may be, but
yeah,
the thing is, conventional rocket engines only work most efficiently at one altitude, whatever that is. whether it's sea level or whether it's outer space or somewhere in between. That doesn't matter with this. Doesn't matter if you could be on the surface of Venus even, assuming your spacecraft can survive the heat, corrosive atmosphere there. You could be on Mars, you could be in outer space. It doesn't matter. You get the best possible thrust per given amount of propellant with this engine, much better than a Bell engine, and the engine is lighter, and you could eliminate the hydraulics or the pneumatics that they use to swivel the conventional Bell engine for steering and course changes. You could use differential thrust parts of the array, and they had a vehicle called the X-33 was built around this engine, and it was almost ready to go. It was someone's pig-headed insistence, though, on making the fuel tanks out of composite that killed the program.
Now, is that this little triangle white shuttle-looking thing?
Looks like a shampoo bottle of wings, and
yep,
it was not a full-scale. It was a suborbital prototype, but it was expected that. Well, what they found later is they could have stayed with the aluminum fuel tanks, and because the fuel tanks were also the fuselage. Well, I mean, that's like how conventional rockets are too. And they stayed with that. We probably would have had a full-size manned version of that by now.
I just wonder if they didn't come up with something like that at Area 51. They're just not telling us. That's my optimism speaking.
Hard to say, but I will tell you this. There's a private corporation called ARCA that is... I'm kind of wondering about their methodology, but, I realize that, you have people that say, well, we've been doing this for 50 years. This is the only right way, yada, yada, yada. I know there's more than one way to skin a cat, but he thinks that he can build a small single-stage orbit rocket, and it would using an area spike built out of composite. I'm not so sure, though. I kind of wonder about his choice of propellant and whether this idea could work. But if he makes it fly, even suborbitally, maybe that might get someone else to. Maybe it might get Jeff Bezos, who already has the new Raptor rocket engine there. Like as I said earlier, they did one successful full duration test firing with it. But if this thing actually flies as well as it works on a test stand, it will beat the Russian engine. But if he could build an area spike like that, well, I mean, you can build a space shuttle with it. Build a small space shuttle. I know that the Russians were trying, the Europeans were trying. The Europeans were trying to develop one, and they canceled it. The Russians were working on one they called Max, and I think they canceled it. And now there's supposedly talk there about bringing it back. So there people are working on this problem, but I just don't know of any unified effort yet.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I want to be on Mars so bad it hurts. Some days I think about it. So we should have been there and had a shopping mall, Chick-fil-A on Mars by now.
Well, Mars.
At least a dude with a flag.
It might be Martin Martian.
Yeah. Have you seen Apollo 18? That movie? Obviously not real.
No, I don't watch much modern movies. In fact, I think the last movie I actually watched was the remake of Clash of the Titans.
Wow. Now I can see why you haven't watched any after that.
Yeah.
With the mechanical owl?
Well, that was the 83 version. I like that one better. Well, yeah, but the new one, they kind of took some liberties that, well, if you know anything about mythology, you'd be going like, well, you could tell that this is like some of these fake docudramas. You know, maybe a nice storyline, but it is, after all, a story.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
you can't beat that original made-for-TV Clash of the Titans. I always loved mythology back in school anyway, so I was like this is kind of cool because it's slow and I can keep up. But the Apollo 18 was about a classified moon landing to go rescue Russians that went up there that nobody knew about. And it turned out the rocks on moon were actually like little bugs that could kill you, and that's why they didn't go back.
Well, that kind of sounds like this really cheesy movie called Moontrap came out and starring none other than Walter Koenig. Yes, Chekhov of Star Trek.
Hello, computer.
Oh, you should watch that movie. Actually, that would be that movie there. It is. I don't know if it's supposed to be a sci-fi horror movie. Is not working because I'm laughing at these. This is supposed to be scary.
Say Moontrap.
Moontrap, yeah, these monsters that build themselves out of junk and anything else they can get their hooks into, including human body parts, I might add. And they build themselves in these mechanical beastie colossus things, and I'm going like, okay. And they're on the moon, and they wait for them to land just so they can take their lunar module and then come to the Earth or whatever. Like, okay. Say, Koenig, you must have been hard up for a payday that day.
He must have had some ex-wives out there somewhere with that kind of.
Maybe
it's like all these rock bands coming back to life. But dang, you're like 90 years old.
Yeah, I know. It's like, are you trying to do that guitar riff on a walker now?
Yeah. What was that other one? Oh God, Iron Sky. It was about all the Nazis fleed to the backside of the moon. Dude, it was crazy.
Oh. Sorry about that. I dropped the phone.
I heard grass.
I heard Nazi indeed. Like really gone to the moon. I think Wernher von Braun would have something to say about that idea, as he would have said bollocks.
I'm glad you said that. How much have you gone into Wernher von Braun? I'm sure a lot. But
I'm familiar.
Like on his deathbed, he said the fake alien invasion was coming.
He said that?
Yeah, he said beware the fake alien invasion to get the New World Order started. It's like one of those tinfoil hat type things, you know.
I don't know about that. That's you. I put it this way: a lot of conspiracy theories are not just theories; they're facts. There's evidence, facts, and evidence to back it up.
Oh yeah, they come from
circumstantial or not. But people are put in prison every day for a lot less. I mean, you just have the terrible luck being in the wrong place, wrong time. And something terrible happens, you get blamed for it. And that's not exactly a high burden of proof, but I'm afraid the burden of the preponderance of evidence, some of these conspiracy theories, kind of moves them to conspiracy fact. But I don't know.
There was another thing that goes like part A, part B. With that, von Braun was that his tombstone has the psalm about the firmament, about the dome over the sky, and that's what the flat earthers use. That Wernher von Braun was given a clue from beyond the grave with his epitaph. It goes deep.
The flat earthers.
Oh yeah, man, they're classic. It's such a train wreck that I can't look away a lot of the times.
Well, when you think about it, the reason why we have flat earthers is some of the things the establishment have done, basically to tarnish the credibility of science in the eyes of the public. I mean, come on. They're trying to mix science and politics, and that's a bad combination. Scientists are only interested in the truth.
Yeah, most of
They
them.
don't
The ones that are all about the grants are the ones that are bad.
exactly. I mean, a good scientist, he's not out to protect the sacred cows. But climate change is just one of several.
See, it's a sacred cow.
Well, it's I don't know
Feels
if
like
you're
it.
ever familiar with the H.L. Mencken. He's basically an American curmudgeon.
I've
he
heard of him. Yeah.
he was active 100 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and I think one of his said the public gets menaced by an endless series of hobgoblins, all of which are imaginary, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I definitely have heard that one.
Well, that's what I think some of this stuff is. It's just imaginary hobgoblins.
And if they truly believed it, they wouldn't travel to the climate summit in their
See,
private planes.
I used to be a reporter. That was why I was a photographer, and I can tell you it's one reason why I'm no longer in journalism,
I do
and
not
why I'm
blame
an
you.
electrician now.
There's a lot
Yeah,
of soul searching goes along with being in that field.
I got disgusted.
Yeah.
That and the fact that the job prospects just went down the drain right when I graduated. Huh. Thank you.
So
Thanks a
did you go
lot.
into journalism in college?
Yes, I majored in journalism. And that was back
Oh
in the
shit.
late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah, I was in television production. Wanted to be a hunting show host. Tried to get a job as
And
an executive producer, but ended up on Redstone as a VTC guy.
BTC, what's that?
Video teleconference, like a FaceTime
Oh, well, that's something.
on screen. And I was that guy. I was the guy who put it on the screen.
Oh,
Make it
okay.
so.
Well, that's something.
Oh yeah, it was a nice. I count my. I thank God every day I didn't go into reporting with making $25,000 a year and working 19 days a week.
Yeah, pretty much.
You get to come
That's
home
what I
8 to
was.
5.
That's what I was doing, pretty much.
hmm And God forbid you're a sports person. You're out every day, and weekends forget
Oh
about it.
well, that thing is, if you're in the news like I was, news doesn't wait.
Nope.
Something happens at 3 in the morning, you have to get out there and cover it. Forget about sleep. Your cat might not be talking to you when you come home because you didn't feed her that morning because you had to go cover that plane crash or car accident or bank robbery or
Which city
whatever.
did you report in? Where you at?
I was in Columbia, Missouri,
Oh gosh, I'm glad you
and
got
then
out of there.
then in Fulton, Missouri is a little town about 25 miles to the east. Before I got out of it, yeah, I've heard about some things that are going on. Who was that idiot? Who was that idiot at MU that I'm sure the president and board of trustees wish she kept her yap shut. Melissa Click was her name. Yeah, it was Melissa Click. Thank you for bringing embarrassment to my alma mater.
Oh, you went to Mizzou.
Yes, I graduated from MU, and that's where I got my bachelor's from. I kind of wish I hadn't now because of the likes of her.
Oh my God, yeah, she's a train wreck.
Train wreck.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a little too charitable. You know what I'd compare her to? I'd compare her to one of those projectiles put in one of those Navy hypervelocity railguns and fired into a target. That'd be a little more descriptive of what she is. Train wreck.
I knew what you were talking about when you said it with Mizzou. I looked at it, I saw that face. I was like, oh God.
Yes, that face.
God, can't mistake it. Get your
About
hands
as
off
popular,
me.
probably as popular with people who went to University of Mizzou as Angela Merkel is with effing Germans. Yeah, that popular. Or should I say unpopular?
Hey, I went to Alabama. We had our trouble too.
Let's see. That wasn't with the coach or anything, was it?
No, that was Penn State.
Oh,
Alabama had the
I don't.
George Wallace in the schoolhouse door
Oh yeah.
by Foster Auditorium. I used to work security late night, and I would go stand over there. Like, damn, that happened right here. I'm just chilling here smoking a cigarette.
Well, where I used to eat lunch, and when I was at the University of Missouri, I ate lunch at the site of one of Bloody Bill Anderson's most infamous massacres. Bloody Bill Anderson was a guerrilla during the Civil War. The Union troops murdered members of his family, and he went apeshit. He went nuts. This guy, well, he was. You would say he was certifiably insane. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But he and his Confederates, when the Union soldiers were camped in that very same spot where I was eating my lunch, which is now the University Quadrangle by the administration building at MU, he and his Confederates crept in this encampment with hatchets, and they started giving everybody there the Lizzie Borden treatment.
Oh gosh, the Union camp.
Oh yeah, they made sure all their victims were dead, and this guy would run around doing things like that, laughing. You know, I mean that's what the accounts of him say. It said he would laugh in a deranged, maniacal manner. You know, and he was a maniac from everything I've been able to find out about him. And I went to the cave where he and his Confederates stashed their weapons and their supplies, sometimes stashed themselves. Union troops eventually caught up to and killed him. I mean, this guy would have been. I guess you could compare him to he would say he's like Osama bin Laden's younger brother by another mother.
Bloody Bill Anderson, killed in Albany.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's Albany. I think Albany, Missouri.
Yeah, not New York or Georgia. I was assuming why he'd be over there.
Yeah, well, like I said, no different than how some of my Ukrainian and Russian ancestors were. Some of the wars they had to fight against the Islamic invaders, as well as the Mongols.
Man, that's rough. That's right there in the crosshairs of every war ever fought, right there in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, the word Ukraine means borderland. Always someone else's borderland.
What was the Polish, the other one you were mentioning?
Well, my father and his parents were living in what was Eastern Poland. But my grandfather was an ethnic Ukrainian, and my grandmother was an ethnic Russian. So I have Russian and Ukrainian ancestry, and what's really funny is that they're not the best friends. What's happening now in eastern Ukraine, well, that was instigated by the United States and other powers that basically had no business getting involved in a dispute that was set in motion by the Bolsheviks. And that was in turn set in motion by events that have gone back as far as 1,000 years ago. So a lot of suffering there now. Makes me glad I'm not there.
Oh yeah, and they just had that other thing there just a year or two ago. Then they shot down an airplane.
Well, that whole thing. First of all,
Georgia and Ukraine.
Well, no, seriously. Why would they allow aircraft to fly over a combat zone? I mean, you have to be really born yesterday to not know that the kind of surface-air missiles that both Ukraine and Russia have, they both have the same basic. It was a Buk missile. And both countries have them. Lots of countries have these missiles, by the way.
They're like standard equipment nowadays, those kind of missiles.
Well, that particular type of missile is standard equipment, I think, for 24 countries at least. Now, the missiles themselves vary. There are different versions of these missiles, different ranges. The warheads different, but why would these people allow airliners to fly over this area, knowing that these missiles would have no problem reaching cruising altitude of an airliner, and they would have no problem catching up to an airliner even from 40 miles away? Someone explain that.
I think it had someone on it that somebody didn't want to make it.
I kind of have to wonder about that.
You've heard about
there was someone, 300 people dead, blamed on. Of course, they were trying to blame Russia for it. I'm not convinced that they're the ones who did it, though.
It could easily be a false flag. I mean, that's
what I'm thinking. Yeah. Well, you see, the thing is, you got to understand one thing about Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe, they have a mafiosi too, but the mafiosi they have there are not quite like the ones they're not like the Italian mob that you see in the movies or the Irish mob. These people have PhDs, and yet they can cut your throat with a smile. In other words, they're basically a college professor meets a thug. Okay?
It's almost robotic.
Yeah.
Like a superhero.
And these people have access to these kinds of weapons. So how do we know who's to say it wasn't some criminal underworld figure who was behind this? We don't know. All I know for sure is that when they shot that missile at that plane, it homed in on their radar and exploded several feet from the cockpit, and it killed everybody in the forward part of the plane instantly. Then the plane broke apart, and some of those people, unfortunately, were alive when they fell 30,000 feet to their deaths. And the local people there heard the explosion, came out, saw what happened, and they were greeted with a sight that, thankfully, is not something that's seen every day.
No shit. So they fell. People just falling like snow around them. Just black, black,
yeah.
Black, black.
I saw photos of the crash site. Ugh. Like I said, my father used to be a medical doctor, and my father did this kind of stuff for the police before he became an MD. I did this for homicide investigations when I was in Columbia after I left journalism. I was in the photography business for a little while longer after that before I left completely. And I did this, and my goodness, this was like one of the worst crime scene photos I've ever seen.
Jeez,
and I've seen some bad ones.
Oh yeah, especially in Columbia, Missouri. I bet you have. I bet you've seen some great.
Columbia is not a big city. It's 100,000 people. It's a college town, but they have big city problems.
Well, it's got Columbia University there, don't they?
Just University of Missouri, Columbia.
Yeah.
And then Stevens College, which is a women's college. A lot of rich people send their kids there. Will tell you this though. I actually met. I don't know if you ever watched Gilligan's Island. Have you ever watched Gilligan's Island?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember Mary Ann?
Yep. The little
probably the most
pigtail.
Yes, probably the most likable character of all the 7 of them. I actually met her there. She graduated from there. I actually met her. No kidding, I did. I had to look twice.
Is that Mary Ann? Was it before or after the? Well, I guess after. It had to be after.
After. Well, I mean,
so you would have known her before.
Oh, I would have known her before, but she didn't look all that different afterwards. She was like over 20 years older than me, and she was, very nice. I mean, she was actually surprisingly like the character she portrayed on TV. I mean, I was stunned. I never expected to meet her.
So you were
But I used to watch Gilligan's Island.
were you a Ginger or Marianne fan in the heyday?
No, I didn't have anything against Ginger. I don't even know what ever happened to her.
I think they all died.
Oh, yeah, I think they're all gone now. But I think first the elderly couple were the first to go, and
Oh
I think
yeah.
it was Skipper and then Gilligan. I mean, Dawn Wells might still be alive because I think she's the youngest.
Gilligan
But
hadn't been going all that long.
yeah,
5 years or so.
yeah. So I used to watch that. I enjoyed that show all that immensely.
Gilligan's Island.
But they don't air it anymore.
Now you reminded me of something a while ago. It says change the subject a little, but the Ukrainian plane that the passengers fell. Have you ever heard that the Challenger people fell? They didn't die on the explosion.
Nope. They were alive when the cabin
When it hit the
fell
ground.
into the ocean. I think, though,
God.
I hope it's been said. Well, I don't know. Here's the thing that makes me wonder. They had emergency life support. They were in spacesuits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was independent of the space shuttle systems. Well, they found that 3 of them had turned theirs on. So that means at least 3 of them were
Yeah, they
not
saw.
only alive,
They
but
acknowledged
aware
it was happening. Yeah, man. I found that out 2 years ago.
Yeah, so
You don't think they passed out before they got to the ground though, from the velocity?
nope. That people who say that don't know what they're talking about because Felix Baumgartner, he went up almost 24 miles in a balloon,
Mm-hmm.
and he jumped, and he fell at over 800 miles per hour in free fall.
Was he farther away
did
than
not-
Challenger?
He was much higher up than Challenger. Challenger blew apart I think it blew apart about 10 miles above the ground, or no, closer to about 13 miles above the ground. But he was about nearly twice as high when he jumped. And he fell earth straight down over 800 miles per hour before the denser atmosphere began to slow him down. And he was wearing a pressure suit. And he had a special multi-stage parachute. And he did not black out.
He got to spinning though. They thought he was going to.
Yeah, that point he was fighting unconsciousness because of what it was doing to his blood flow. Spinning his blood out to his extremities. But he managed to stop the spin, and he managed to descend safely to the ground. And he didn't pass out. I mean, neither did the guy who helped him, Captain Joe Kettinger.
Mm-hmm.
He was the first one to do this stunt.
And that was the one he kept talking to while he was up there, wasn't it? The one
That's
in the
right.
booth.
Yeah, and he didn't pass out either. So no, I mean, I don't know. I remember that when it happened. I mean, at first I thought, "Oh, what the heck is this? Is this real?" I didn't believe it at first. I saw it happen on TV. And I was like, well, what the heck is this? And I realized that it wasn't. It was, it took me a couple of seconds to digest what had happened. The whole, I was at USA when this happened, and everybody was like stunned, state of shock.
What year was that? Was 81?
86.
86? So I was just a toddler then.
Yeah, and I remember the loss of Columbia too. Again, when that happened, I had to do a double take when that happened, and that was why they made the decision to retire the shuttle. I'm sure.
God, Columbia.
The biggest problem with the space shuttle was this: the first 4 flights, were test flights, right?
Of the shuttle? No, it didn't.
They were test flights. They had there was only the pilot and co-pilot. You know they had ejector seats?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So they could have punched out. The problem was they couldn't have done that for all 7 or however many there were. There was no way for them to do it. So after that, they removed those ejector seats.
I mean, that would have only been affected during like liftoff, though. You couldn't get ejected in outer space. Just been
Yeah,
chilling.
that's correct.
It's been chilling out
The
there.
launch escape tower, like on the earlier rockets, that was only good if something went wrong, like in the first minute or two of flight or before the first stage was through. And even if they had that in the space shuttle, probably after the SRBs separated, that if something really went wrong, they could ditch the tank and then they could do an emergency about face then. But there's a certain place where if something goes wrong, you're too low to do that and you're too close to the ground. You know, this is basically you're out of luck. And I believe the Challenger was right at that point when this happened.
Yeah,
But
they don't advertise that capsule. They're still alive in there, though. They don't talk about that very much.
well, it's not really hard to imagine why.
It's like, how is it 30 years later I'm just now finding out about this?
Well, it's not something you would really. Well, you got to think about this. If that was your family member in there, would you want that released to the public?
Well, no.
I think that's why.
It's kind of one of those things you
And
keep to yourself.
yeah, I think so. And plus, it was already bad enough that they lost the vehicle and all that, and you know that the damage it did to public confidence in all this. I mean, this is not. Fortunately, we're not like the Soviet Union. They killed people like that a lot in the then Soviet space program. My brother and I knew an army officer. He used to be an army officer. One of his jobs, or he was either Army or Air Force, I think, one of the two. But his job was to listen in on these space flights they were doing, and they did them in secrecy. So if something went south, they just didn't tell the public about it. Only when things went well did the public know.
For the Russians.
Well, I wouldn't say Russians, say Soviets, because. Yeah. But he said, and I quote, "A hell of a lot more people died up there than the American public know, or even the Russian public."
Yeah, they're just smoking folks left and right. Then, not even sending chimps.
Well, I mean, these are the people that we do know about, like the Soyuz flight, the first flight of the Soyuz spacecraft. The Soyuz spacecraft today has been, for a long time, a reliable and safe way of getting people to and from the ISS, but it wasn't always that way. The first flight was a disaster. No sooner had the lone pilot took off, he discovered all kinds of problems with his spacecraft. Shortage of electrical power, his instruments were not working properly, and he was reporting a litany of these problems back to mission control. And as time went on, they got more and more apprehensive about keeping him up there. So they made the decision to have him return to Earth ASAP. He did so. The reentry went off as planned, surprisingly, but what killed him was what happened when the parachutes opened, or rather didn't open as they were supposed to. His main chute fouled up, failed to deploy. Kamarov attempted to deploy his reserve chute, which promptly fouled up with the main chute. So he hit the ground at 400 miles per hour.
Jeez. Out there in Siberia?
Well, I'm not. It was in Kazakhstan somewhere, but let's just say he made a nice big burn mark on the Cossack landscape.
I bet.
And he wasn't the only one to die in Soyuz. There were 3 others who died because someone made the brilliant decision to put 3 people in that without pressure suits. You know, people wonder, why do American astronauts always take off and re-enter in pressure suits? Well, this is why. Well, they got away with it during launch. They went to the space station. And that went off without a hitch, so far as we know. And then it was time to return home. Unfortunately for them, they have to do this maneuver in the Soyuz when you're re-entering. You know, the Soyuz is a 3-part vehicle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, only one. It's like the U.S. Apollo spacecraft. Only the command module is built to come back. Yeah. The rest of it is not. It burns up. Well, 2 of the 3 sections of the Soyuz spacecraft burn up in the atmosphere. The other one, with the crew inside, is what has the heat shield. Well, before they re-enter, right before they hit the Earth's atmosphere, they have to fire some explosive bolts to separate from the rest of the spacecraft. Unfortunately, that caused enough of a jolt there's a valve in these spacecraft. I still have them today, that when they're coming down, when they're getting close to the ground, this valve is supposed to open and let the oxygen out and the fresh air in. You know, well, this valve opened at the worst possible time, while they were still 70 miles up, and that spacecraft depressurized, and they all suffocated.
Jeez, that's like being in a 747, and the window's open.
Yeah,
but 10 times worse.
A lot quicker.
Yeah.
In their case. And so they went into re-entry blackout. Mission control waited for the usual time. And then when they were supposed to come back out of blackout, they were expected to hear from them. Say, hey, we're here, we're alive, right? But they didn't hear anything. They heard silence, despite repeated calls. The rescue team they knew where they were coming down. The rescue team was waiting on them. Well, when they opened the capsule, they found them in their seats like mannequins. They were dead. Blood had boiled. Those are the 2, there were other accidents. They've lost lots of people. And I'm going like, some of these I might see happening, but some of them look to me like, could you be that careless with the lives of people? And that's one thing the United States, I mean, I think they despite what happened to Apollo 1, that was really a miscalculation too. But you know, we could have avoided that if we had learned about what had happened to a Russian cosmonaut in a similar circumstance. He died the same way.
With the John Grissom and Alan Shepard.
Yeah, Grissom and White and Chaffee burning to death in a pure oxygen
Who's Alan
atmosphere.
Shepard?
Well, that's what happened to this guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't even in a spacecraft. They were doing some sort of test in the pure oxygen atmosphere. So, I mean, if the United States and the Soviets were talking to one another then, I think some of these accidents could have been avoided. But, hey, you know, that's...
Hey, they were in a race.
Yeah.
No talking.
So I don't know. I mean, I hope they do come up with a replacement space shuttle, and there does seem to be. I think there's going to be one, but I think it's going to be the private sector who's going to actually.
Hey, I don't care. I don't care who it is, just as long as somebody does something and gets us back.
Well, the thing is, if they're ever going to be large, you have to do something about the cost of getting a pound of anything in space. And
oh yeah,
SpaceX and Rocket Lab and Arca, some of these other companies out there, Blue Origin, they NASA too. I mean, people are working on the problem, but when, I don't know. I was led to believe that by this time we would be on Mars.
Yeah, that's you would think. I mean, 2020.
Didn't happen.
I mean, they always spouted 2020. I guess it sounded good in 2005, though. It sounded great, but it got killed by our last president. That heavy lift project.
Oh, you mean Obama?
Yeah. Of course, it could have been failing anyway, for all I know. I mean, I've heard reports that it wasn't going as planned.
Well, you only have to look at the history of the Saturn V to know how hard it would be to develop that.
I said if they wanted to go back to the moon, just go out here on I-565 and crank that Saturn V up and use it. I mean, it's sitting there. Nobody's using it.
That's actually not a real rocket. Actually, I think the one that's standing upright.
Yeah, the one you can see.
That's sheet metal and everything, and it's cleverly done. It's to duplicate the outside, but there is an entire Saturn V I know in Huntsville. Every piece of it, you can see everything from the launch tower to the first stage, and there's a first stage at Stennis. You can see.
Is that the one that's in the Davidson Center? The one that's laying down?
In Huntsville, I think so.
Yeah.
I know there's another one at Houston.
You're talking about Stennis base. I was like, where's Stennis?
Stennis is on I-10, and it's right at the border between Louisiana and Mississippi, and you can see the first stage and the visitor center from the interstate.
I was trying to picture where Stennis was in Huntsville when you said that. I was like, where the hell?
No, it's not Huntsville. Than I do. But they test. I wasn't aware of this, but before they would fly a shuttle mission, they would take the engines there. They would test fire them at full thrust, full duration. And if the engines worked properly, they then packed them up and sent them to the Cape and put them on the shuttle. So what I did not know those engines actually were fired twice.
I always thought they were single use.
No, they're not. No, they're reusable. The thing is, though, that they were planning to put those in the SLS and throw them away while working on an expendable version. It seems to me like, though, what they ought to do is at least preserve a few of them and use them for testing, like they kept all that Saturn V hardware. They'd actually use some of that in tests. They were toying with the idea, of bringing back the F1 engine. But they opted to go with a stretched solid rocket booster instead.
Say go with what works.
Yeah, but solid rockets have one big problem. Once you start one, you can stop it, but it's really hard to do so. And with a crew aboard?
Well, that's not optimal.
A liquid fuel rocket could be cut off instantly if the need arises. Which you may recall on the space shuttle, there was at least one time when it was about to take off, and the computer sensed there was something not right, and it automatically stopped the engines.
I do a couple of times.
Well, on one of those occasions, if it hadn't have done that, there'd have been a crash.
I remember it did it earlier in the toward the end of the space program. It did that one of the last times. It had to delay because of that. not space shuttle
Yep.
program.
So they were toying with bringing back the F1 engine and updating it. And if they had done that, it would have then been called the F1B, and it would have been a significant improvement over the original engine. And as it is, as powerful as they are, they're not state of the art, not anymore.
Well, no, obviously not.
Well, it's the way they work. You can look this up, but there's more than one way to feed fuel into the engine, and believe it or not, it actually used the exact same method that the V2 missile did. In other words, in that case, it used a separate supply of chemicals to generate a gas to drive the turbine. The F1 simply burned some of the fuel and oxygen in a gas generator, which was used to drive a turbine. And normally, it's simply dumped over the side. What's unusual about the F1 is what they did with it afterwards. They actually used it to protect the nozzle of the engine from the heat from the gases coming out of the thrust chamber, because it's so much cooler by the time it gets discharged along the inside of the nozzle. It's much cooler than what's coming out of the thrust chamber, so it actually provided a barrier that kept the engine from overheating.
They just left it in there so it didn't burn anything. It's crazy how that stuff works.
So it still is the most powerful single-chamber liquid fuel engine that was ever flown. So that record, it still holds the record.
That was on the shuttle or the Saturn V, the F1?
Saturn V. What the space shuttle had was far more advanced, far more efficient, but also a hell of a lot more complicated, and it was a serious problem to develop. I mean, they had problems with the F1s getting them to run stably, but they had and it did result in a couple of explosions, but they had repeated explosions with the trying to get the space shuttle's main engines to work, because they had to work at twice the pressure as the Saturn V's did. I mean, if you look at how the space shuttle engine works, it really is a remarkable accomplishment of engineering, because the turboshaft machinery, put it to you this way: if you had a couple of those, it would push in a battleship. It could push it along at over 30 knots.
Just one engine, just.
The turboshaft machinery from two of those engines would just one engine, well over 100,000 shaft horsepower.
Jesus, that's insane. Never humans built that. I think they were built by aliens.
So it's you're talking about pumps the size of a trash can.
Oh yeah, massive.
But they're connected to a turbine that runs at 3 times the speed of a jet engine.
Makes you wonder how it keeps from flying apart. I guess it didn't sometimes.
Well, it did.
I was like, well, I guess it did.
It did. I mean, Russians have developed even shake a rocket at if they got it right. Because they opted to do the opposite approach, what they used with the space shuttle, in terms of how you see that burns a small amount of the fuel and oxidizer is burned, and actually what they do is they use a lot of hydrogen and a little oxygen and they burn that in a pre-burner, and that is used to power the turbines before it's burned a second time. It seems crazy, a crazy idea, right?
It does. I actually thought my phone just cut out. I was like, what did happen?
Oh,
So I was,
but the reason why they did it,
I was doing it.
so you use a small amount of one propellant and all the other, and you direct that through the turbines. It powers the pumps, and then instead of being dumped over the side and wasted, it's burned a second. And it's bad stuff for a lot of metals.
Would you say that's what the Russians did?
But pure oxygen, or nearly pure at high pressure and temperature, even more so. If you ever cut steel with a welding torch, you'll understand what they were running into, because the metal would just catch on fire. It would just ignite.
Yeah, definitely have. It's basically like a giant engine doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. So they had many not as many, and it was one of the biggest problems they had. And once they got working, and once they figured out how to refurbish them for a flight, but it's still part of the reason why it took 30,000 people working for months to prepare a shuttle for launch. And those engines, as complicated as they were, had to have a lot to do with it. So that's why I'm hoping they would really push the area spike.
You would think today's the first time I've ever heard of that. And it seems like I might have to go.
Oh, it's all over YouTube.
Have to do a whole episode on that.
It's all over YouTube, and the really cool thing about this is that it's scalable.
Would that be something they could put into like a smaller ship to make like individual, like jet plane sized space vehicles?
Individual thrusters arranged around a truncated cone. That's it.
And not very complicated at all. Really not.
Well, it is actually quite complicated to make.
Well, to make it, obviously.
But the concept is very simple.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'd like to see that, because if you're familiar with Star Wars, I'm sure you've seen all the scenes of the spacecraft taking off from the ground.
Yeah, just
and going on their space and not having to lug along a tank or maybe a couple of big solid rocket boosters to get above the atmosphere.
Yeah, I want that. I want that to happen.
If they bring back the X-33 and turn it into a man, you can say goodbye to the external tanks, goodbye to the boosters, and it will still land like an airplane.
We'll bring it back. All right, I think we've chanced our luck here with this connection, so I think I may have to wrap it up.
Yeah,
because I can see my router getting hot. No, it doesn't matter. I'll go 3 hours. My router's starting to get hot and starting to drop, so I don't want to ruin a good thing.
Uh-oh.
I'm getting a new one.
So are you recording? Are you recording all this and then just edit it later or something, or how do you do that?
Yeah, it's one big batch file. And I'll edit it when we get done, or probably next week. But
yeah, you might want to edit, because I think we kind of went a little longer than we planned.
Oh no, it'll be an hour and a half at least. I don't plan anything. I'll do 4 hours. But I told Brian Shirkley messaged me while we were here. He said, "Tell him Brian said hi."
Yeah, I'll tell him.
He's crazy.
Tell him so next time I hear from him. Yeah, he's a bit of a nut, all right.
All right, we'll wrap it up. And
You seen his van, haven't you?
oh yeah, the Vanzilla.
Yeah.
Have you tried his hot sauce?
Yeah, actually, I did.
That is the best shit ever.
It's actually quite good.
It
goes pretty good
my
on
favorite.
sausage biscuits.
Oh yeah,
It goes really good on the sausage.
I have it on everything I can possibly do. Chicken wings, I toss chicken wings in them. They're so hot, be sweating. So good, it hurts.
That's a little bit too hot for me.
It's so good.
I like a little kick. Just a little though.
I'll flat out hurt myself. Him and George's recipe is on fire.
Well, he better keep that a secret.
Hey, I flat out told him. I said I will give you $2,000 for sharing that company. I did. I said I was ready to sell my truck. I said if this stuff goes public, I want a piece of it. Well, all right, I'll go ahead and end the recording, and thanks for being on. I guess I want to have you back on again and discuss some more stuff, because I didn't even get to a tenth of what I wanted to talk about.
Well, I don't know. I hope I didn't talk your ear off too much.
That's exactly what I wanted. I'm like a small child when I do these things. That's why I like it so much. But yeah, I know you got to get to the shipyard pretty early.
Yeah. I build joint high speeds for the Navy.
The simple ones. Yep. Okay, this thing is starting to fade hardcore. All right, man, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off before it cuts it off for us, because if mine's starting, I may have to restart it before I can go to bed.
Alrighty,
God,
well, I'll just I guess you get with me later if you need anything else.
All right, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you later.
Later, Gator.
All right, see ya. Doo-doo.